Hello, this is Pretty Guardian, and today I'm excited to be talking to you about what I think is going to be my favorite RPG of 2021, Edge of Eternity. Edge of Eternity is an ambitious RPG made by an independent studio that just released here in June of 2021. It had been in development for a while before that. I actually bought the game about a year ago, and when I was looking at buying it, I was very hesitant because it was still in that early access phase. But what I was seeing is that the development team was communicating almost every week, certainly every month, about the game, the development process, what was going on, doing sales, different things. They just seemed very involved communicating with their community, whether that was through Steam or Discord or wherever. And there was just something about them that made me go, you know what? These guys are different. They say that they're lovers of JRPGs, and I can see that passion shining through in the product that they're working on. And so I decided to wait until the game had its full release because I wanted to be able to play through the story kind of in its entirety and make my mind up at that point on how I felt about the game. And so I did that. I played about 60 hours. I completed most of the side quests except for a couple that would have been really tedious for me. I kind of skipped those and went to the end. It took me about 61 hours. They say that the game gives you about 50 hours of content. Based on my experience, I would say that that's absolutely true. You probably could have rushed the storyline and completed it a little bit faster. Or if you were more of a completionist, you could probably have gotten more than 60 hours of gameplay in the game, doing all of the side quests, collecting all of the crystals, making all the weapons, that sort of thing in the game. After completing the game, I knew that I wanted to make a video about it, but I had to kind of stop for a minute and just really think about everything that I had played, everything that I had experienced in the game. It was very impactful for me. This is one of those games that reminded me why I love RPGs as a genre, and it just really had so many things that I look for in a good RPG in it. And so for that reason, I wanted to make a video that kind of did it justice. This isn't going to be a review of the game. This is going to be kind of my thoughts, impressions, and feelings on it. I just want to sit back and talk about the game for a minute. For starters, this game is so ambitious. There really isn't anything like it on the market. When I was looking at a lot of the reviews for it, a lot of the negative feedback, you know what? Some of it was fair. And then there was some of it where I don't think they really understood what this game was meant to be. And so there were things like stiff animations during combat. You know what? Some of the combat animations are stiff, but we really have to keep in perspective that this was a game made by a studio. Right now, I think they have around 14-ish people. They had even less during the majority of development. What can we really compare it to? There's games like Greedfall, where Greedfall isn't necessarily a AAA game, but it was also made by a team of more than quadruple what we have in Midgar Studios. And then there's other indie games, like one that I'm playing right now is Chris Tales. And Chris Tales is absolutely beautiful animation, but it's certainly not ambitious in like the 3D perspective that you get in Edge of Eternity. And then also length of the game. Edge of Eternity is a 60-hour game, whereas Chris Tales is about 20 hours. It's a lot easier to do something well for 20 hours than to do something well for 60 hours. So I think maybe it's kind of natural to go like, okay, well then maybe they should have had a shorter but more polished experience. But I also think that the type of story that they're telling and the expansiveness of the world, the greater impact of the game that they're trying to make would have been lost if they had gone with a shorter game. So I don't really feel like there's anything else that you can compare it to. This game punches well above its weight as far as games go. This is something people will compare very naturally to AAA games. And when you do that, it's probably going to fall short. You have to remember that it was a small team made by people who love the genre. So when I look for a good JRPG, the first thing I look at is story. I want a story that's at least somewhat gripping, and it doesn't necessarily have to be grand, but I certainly feel like this one was. So we have our main character. His name is Darian. In chapter 0, he is in the army, and we witness his squad not only get killed by the enemy, but we actually find out that they're being sacrificed by the army that they work for. So the army is using them to power this like crazy magical ritual that they're using to fight off alien invaders. If it sounds crazy, it is, but I was there for it. And for me, I was actually emotionally invested in at least a couple of these characters right away. And so afterwards, we see Darian kind of turn into this like moody, sad boy edgelord, but it really makes sense for him because you can tell that he's struggling with PTSD, he's struggling with keeping these secrets, he's struggling with deserting the army. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to stand by his troops and help them out, but we have like multiple factions and just like a lot of complexity in everything that's happening. And that really only increases throughout the majority of the story as we add different characters, and we kind of uncover a little bit about the corrosion, which is this like disease that is mutating people into monsters. And so we're taken on this like complex and interesting ride. Things start moving a little bit quicker at the end, but they never fully resolve within this story. It's something where they could potentially do a sequel for the game, or I think they're probably going to do some sort of DLC where they kind of expand on what's going on. I do feel like the ending wrapped itself up neatly enough from a development perspective for them to be able to say, okay, this is the finished product for you. Because at a certain point with any creative endeavor, you do have to stop and say, okay, this is good. This is what I want to present to the world. Otherwise, you could sit there in the editing and post-production phase of something like this for forever. So I thought it had a gripping story. And then I also thought the soundtrack was really good. There was somebody who had only played about 7 hours of the game, and they left a review, and they said that the soundtrack was really bland. And if you had only played through 7 hours, I could probably see why you would get that feeling. There is a really good battle theme for the game, but then a lot of the music is just kind of basic stuff that we've heard before. But the more you play it, you have to understand that this is a 50+ hour game, and there were other really standout tracks to me that you found along the way. For example, there is this scene where we're basically being like chased through this tunnel by these killer robots on this futuristic spaceship, and the music kind of turns into this like almost EDM sort of sounding track, and it's not really fitting with the rest of the game, but it's very fitting with A, the location, and B, thematically what was happening. And I thought it was a total vibe. So I actually think the soundtrack was excellent for the game. So we had a good story, we had a good soundtrack, and just the general art was really good. The landscapes were beautiful. We got to explore a lot of gorgeous zones. The character designs were interesting, although not perfect. Like there's some kind of wonkiness with the faces and the eyelashes and just kind of little things. But I think that if you're willing to overlook some of that unrefinedness of the game, you'd see what a gem it is. Like this is something that's really special. The game has a lot of interesting mechanics that are in it. Combat is turn-based and strategic. You're on kind of a hex grid. Your characters have different abilities that they can use to fight enemies, and there are different mechanics that are required to overcome certain bosses and certain fights. Outside of battles, there are puzzles that you can do in the overland zone, and those usually give you pretty good rewards if you do the puzzles. There are some side quests. There are different types of side quests, like some are go find this, some are go kill this sort of enemy. One of the aspects of the game that I really enjoyed was the crafting system. You have to gather materials and then craft your weapons, and you can socket gems and things like that in them to give yourself different skills. I think it could use a little bit of work in refining those things, but overall I thought the systems were really fun to play in. When I say that it needs work, it really is just minor things. For example, some of the materials needed to craft certain weapons are not necessarily easy to come by when they probably should be, because the tier trees kind of rely on you having that basic item in order to progress the weapons. And the way that like the crystal trees sort of work for the weapons once they're socketed onto your weapons could probably use a little bit of refinement as far as like stats and how you're getting the gems and that sort of thing. But it's stuff that I think is really minor in the grand scheme of how well it works. I also thought the GUI was really nice, like the menu screens and the overlays and just kind of a lot of the peripheral art to the game. It all comes together into something that's really nice, really refreshing, and really different from what I'm seeing in the RPG landscape right now. It's a game that I think combines a lot of what makes old RPGs work really well with a lot of the newer technologies and newer expectations that we have for games. And maybe it doesn't quite deliver for some people, but for me, it was definitely one of the best RPG experiences I've had in a very long time, and certainly in 2021. I think that this is a better game than a lot of AAA games that we've seen, like Jedi Fallen Order, or even like Final Fantasy 15 and some of those ones. So definitely let me know in the comments section if you've heard of this game before, what RPGs you're looking forward to in the year, and just let me know what your thoughts are, because I always love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to do those YouTube-y things like liking and commenting and subscribing, and I will see you in the next video. Until next time, this is Pretty Guardian, logging out.